Welcome to the Veritas Forum, engaging university students and faculty in discussions about life's hardest questions and the relevance of Jesus Christ to all of life.
Thank you all for coming. We're very happy to be here. I'm completely out of place again. I was moderator last year for the Veritas Forum with 2 scientists, and now I'm moderator for 2 economists. I think I've taken 1 economics class in my own past, but I'm very interested to hear the discussion. And in a way, happiness and success and the good life and so forth is a very philosophical topic as well, so perhaps I can contribute something. As was just said, we're going to start with some kind of opening statements, and then we'll get into more of a direct discussion. And I think, Charles, what are you going to start? That's what I have here. So.
All right. I'm really happy to be here. I know everybody starts by saying that, but in my case, I have some credentials to back it up. So I got my graduate degrees here and spending 4 years at Cornell, and then I went away for 6 years. I came back for 8 more years and was a faculty member here. I have 2 kids here, and my wife, between the 2 kids who both went to Cornell, we have 4 degrees among the 4 of us from Cornell. And in fact, we've lived here longer than I think we've lived anywhere, so 12 years. We're currently on the West Coast, but it's we just love Ithaca, love Cornell to death, and we're just delighted to be here. And I'm also not only happy, I'm actually grateful to be here, because on my way here, we took a bit of a detour. So I flew east on Thursday, and my first stop was Boston. I was supposed to give a research seminar yesterday at Boston University. I arrived about the same day as Obama, but he left before I did. And when I woke up on Friday morning, the whole city was in lockdown. My hotel was right a couple of blocks from where the original explosions were. Do we have actually slides? I'm just going to show you a picture if I have it. No? I might not have it. Oh, there it is. This was yesterday morning, out of my hotel room. You know, there was a satellite dish, cops all over the place. Basically, instead of having a research seminar, all 15 campuses were closed, and I had a lot of time to sit in my hotel room and think about the state of the world that we live in. And a lot of that actually sort of flavored what I'm going to share with you today. Let me just start by maybe asking a question. This is way too big a group to cold call, but what do you think of success? Is success a good thing? Yeah. How many of you don't want to be successful? Just put up your hand. So, you know, I think most people think success is a good thing. But what about being a successful liar? Successful thief? What about successful terrorist? Not so good, right? When we think about success, we're defining it in terms of a goal. We define success as the attainment of some sort of goal. And real question really is whether your goal is any good, right? You know, the success of a knife is to cut because it was designed to cut. The success of a racehorse is to run because it was bred to run. What does success look like for a human being? That kind of depends on what you think a human being is. In order to ask these questions, you need some sort of a worldview, some sort of a cogent, some sort of coherent, sort of metaphysical commitment to something. It's kind of like having an answer to the questions that the security guard will ask you when you he finds you in the middle of the night. He'll ask you, you know, who are you? What are you doing here? And where are you going? And no matter how you address the question of success or the pursuit of happiness, in some sense, we all have some intuitive response to that, and that cogent worldview is going to affect how you live. In fact, as a Christian, I think that there's a lot more to life than just trying to be successful at work. I think Professor Frank might agree with that. And I mean, I'm sure he would, actually, because I've read some of the things he's written, and I know him as a friend for many years. But even in the work setting, I think how we live out our lives make a huge difference in the success that we experience, at least the meaning and purpose. And in fact, I think it's self-evident that how we choose to live our lives cannot be separated from what we believe in. Our day-to-day lives are shaped by what we believe in. And certainly that has been true in my own life, in my own career decisions and choices. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself, so maybe at least how I end up being a Christian, at least on the Christian side of this debate. Yeah. I wasn't born a Christian. I grew up in Taiwan. When I was 9 years old, my parents immigrated to Canada. So I grew up in southern Ontario. And I guess my mom became a Christian first. My father was a non-believer. He was a very articulate atheist. And so I grew up, I guess, religiously confused is the right term. You know, I felt like God never introduced himself to me. When I got to college, you know, God and I were sort of in a truce. I couldn't say there was no God. But at the same time, I felt like, you know, I have no reason to really know him, and I felt like if he wanted me to worship him, and if I didn't worship him, he would like send me someplace unpleasant. Then he wouldn't be much of a God to be worth worshiping anyway. So besides, you know, growing up in North America, there were lots of things that seemed more relevant, like, I don't know, photography, fly fishing, you know, girls, you know, stuff. So it didn't really sort of occur to me to think too much about whether God existed until about the second or, well, actually towards the end of my college life. At that point, several things in my life caused me to think again. One of them was actually my father contracted cancer. And the other is I had a few failed romances, that's the nicest way of putting it. So I had a few setbacks in my relational exploits. So now, usually it's the other person's fault, of course, but somewhere along the way I discovered that I don't have control over the most important things in my life, including my feelings, my emotions, my sense of rage or jealousy or lust, many things. And I started to wonder again whether there is whether God really exists. And that question sort of hung there for a while until the fall of 1982. And I just graduated. My father, who had been quite sick, actually became a Christian, and my parents invited me to a Christian camp. I would not have gone except for the fact that I'd already made arrangements to take a week off, and all of my friends wimped out. So I had a week off. I had no choice, and actually the place they chose for the retreat was Finland Falls, Ontario, which is a great fishing place. And so I ended up going, and the fishing was really lousy, and I ended up spending more time in Bible study than I thought I was going to. And sort of to keep the story short, basically, I guess I I remember the first night, it was Monday night. They were doing Bible study, and they were studying the book of Romans, and one passage really hit me. There was a passage in there that says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All have sinned and fall short of God. I hadn't actually paid a whole lot of attention to the Bible, but somehow this all have sinned somehow made me sort of think again and say, well, all means everyone. I'm a proper subset of that, so I have sinned. And for the first time in my life, I actually thought there was something resonated with me on that. And so that was sort of the beginning of that week, and somewhere along the way, I guess I had someone asked me if I would want to receive Jesus into my life. No one ever asked me that. But at that moment and that night, it was a Wednesday night, I suddenly realized if God is knowable, that was the thing I wanted to know more than anything else. And so, this guy was asking if you would raise your hand. I was scared to death. I don't know why I was scared to death, but I sort of raised my little hand. And that precipitated a series of changes. In the aftermath of that, I guess I would say two experiences, two feelings. One was just an experience of inexpressible joy. I was extremely happy. I wanted to hug people when I went down the street. The other was just some sort of a recognition or a dawning or an awareness. And it was sort of an awareness. I remember staying up all night realizing that I screwed up a lot in my life. A lot of things I couldn't remember that I screwed up. Somehow it just kept pouring back at me. And I also started to realize I could actually understand this book called the Bible. I started reading it, something that I always got, I could never go more than a sentence or two before I realized I thought it was silly. So that led to a lot of changes, including my decision to enroll in a PhD, to become a teacher, to apply to Cornell. And then all through my career, I don't actually have much time today to tell you, but actually eventually leading me to coming here and to be here today. I guess I would say that here's the crux of it. We all want to live well. We all want to be happy. We all want to be successful. But to do that, you have to ask yourself why it's so elusive in this human journey. What is the human dilemma that makes happiness and success such a challenge? In fact, let me throw this out, and I think this is one where we actually not going to disagree at all on. There is no real search for happiness that can be had apart from the search for virtue, for goodness. Okay? This is taught to us through many of our religious as well as cultural heritage, including the Greek Stoics, right? If you think that you can find happiness apart from looking for what goodness means, or virtue, or meaning, you will find yourself at a very strange corner in which you have neither. Okay. But the question is, why is it so hard to be good? And for me, being a Christian, I think that the response, the answer, we may have more time to talk about, but for me, I find it a very satisfying response in the Bible. That we who were built as a God-centered creature became, through a certain process, we call it falling, a self-centered creature. And a self-centered creature is going to find a lot of problems. The music doesn't quite play the way it should play in our lives. How am I doing on time? Do I have
Yeah, you're getting close. Maybe another minute or so?
You're so kind. All right, if I have a minute, then let me allocate that minute to a person I like a lot. This guy, David Foster Wallace. How many of you read this? He's written a little book called This is Water. Okay. You can find it on YouTube because this whole book is basically a transcript of his convocation address to the 2005 graduating class of Kenyon College. And although he's not a Christian, he actually has some really cool things to say. And let me just read to you this little passage. I recommend the whole book to you in its entirety. But here he says, in the day-to-day trenches of adult life, he said, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what we worship. And an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, and he lists a bunch, he's not a Christian, and it is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough, never feel you had enough. If you worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, you will always feel ugly. If you worship power, you'll feel weak and afraid, and you'll need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. And he says the insidious thing, actually, is that these forms of worship it's not that they're evil or sinful, it's that they are unconscious. They are our default settings. In other words, you just slip into them. And there was a time when university education cannot be separated from matters of faith and morality. I understand why there is more separation now, but I think maybe the pendulum has swung around too much. We spend all our time in universities very siloed, talking about technical knowledge, sectoral knowledge. We privatize faith. And in the aftermath of this Boston events, we have to ask ourselves, does the world really need more smart people or more good people? And I want to just...
Well, I think we
okay.
We probably should end up. But you will definitely have some time to talk
you got it.
In the later discussion period.
Thank you.
Good.
I appreciate it.
Just doing my moderating job.
I'm grateful.
Bob.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I can't say I'm glad to be back in Ithaca because I've been in Ithaca for 42 years. I started teaching here in 1972, and I used to feel surprised to be able to say to students, since before you were born, but now I say since before your parents were born, I've been teaching at Cornell. I got a note from a colleague today saying that she had seen a poster advertising this event in Goldwyn Smith Hall, and she said, what is this event about? She said there were two big headshots of Charles and me, and across his face was in big red letters, Christian, and across my face was atheist. And apparently the event was at least framed as a violent clash between two incredibly diametrically opposed ways of thinking about the world, which in a way I guess you'd have to say those are very different ways to think about the world. But I think from my knowledge of Charles and conversations with him over the years, I think what it'll really be more about is how people who view the world so differently can come to embrace such a similar, essential view of how the world works and what's required for a life of harmony and contentment. I was baptized as an Episcopalian, confirmed in that faith. I gradually drifted away. I think there's a lot of contingency in life. Maybe the people I hung out with were non-believers. The trend in support for same-sex marriage has been sharply rising, and I think that's an example of the extent to which what people believe depends so strongly on what people around them that they care about and respect believe. And when one more person shifts his opinion from view A to view B, that makes that seem a more normal view. So I think there are all sorts of things people can believe. They sound strange to outsiders. My wife and I enjoyed the Book of Mormon. If you read the Book of Mormon literally, it sounds awfully strange to my ear, but if you imagine somebody from another planet reading the Bible, it would surely sound strange to him too. So what we believe, all of us, is probably strange from a certain perspective. But I have to make sense of the world as someone who doesn't believe that it's all being directed by a higher force. And so my intellectual framework is, for want of another one, the one left to us by Charles Darwin. He, in my opinion, has, among mortal men, said the most informative things about how we got here and what the whole enterprise is all about. And it's a really pretty simple scheme for him. In Darwin's view, individuals evolved by natural selection. The ones that were more likely to leave copies of their DNA into the next generation became more frequent in it, and mutations were selected because they helped individual organisms. So the purpose of the individual, to leave copies of your stuff into the next round. There's nothing very noble sounding about that, and indeed there's a lot of brutality in evolution. If you'll look at the behavior of lions, the lion who becomes the alpha male in a pride after defeating the incumbent alpha male. The very first thing he does is he kills the cubs sired by the previous alpha male. He goes around and brutally shakes them and murders them. And the reason he does that is just a simple Darwinian one. It's that when the mothers of those cubs no longer have cubs to care for, they come into fertility cycle again more quickly, and so he gets to leave more copies of his genes behind in the next generation as a consequence of having done that. And so I think the impression people have when they think about Darwinism is that it's an utterly brutal framework for thinking about why organisms do what they do, and it certainly does help explain a lot of the brutality that we see in the world, even in among our species, but it's more than that. It's not the Spencerian social Darwinism. It's not the survival of the fittest, nature red in tooth and claw. It's not just that. I think the big mistake people make when they think about the Darwinian framework is to think that because it survives, therefore it's good. One of Darwin's key insights was that many things survive because they help individuals survive and reproduce. That's why the traits are selected. But those very same traits create general misery for the larger group the individuals belong to. A nice example that captures that idea, I think, is the difference in size between the male and the female in most vertebrate species, but in particular some species like the elephant seal. The bull elephant seal is 21 to 23 feet long. He's 6,500 pounds. He weighs as much as a Lincoln Navigator. The female in that species weighs only 800 pounds. Why is the male so much bigger? Because it's a polygynous species, Darwin observed. The males take more than one mate if they can. And the if they can qualifier is important because it means that if some take more than one mate, others don't get any mates at all. And then you don't leave your stuff in the next round. So the males, that's priority number one, get a mate. How do you get a mate? You fight with other males to get a mate. And so there was a mutation that made a bull bigger. He was more likely to win his fights. And so he had a harem of 50 cows, all carrying the genes for that larger body size. And it's a horrible thing for the bull elephant seals to be so big, to weigh 6,500 pounds. They have to eat prodigious quantities. They're much more likely to be caught by sharks when they're swimming in the water because they're so fat and unmaneuverable. And the arthritis they get at a young age is a consequence of their weight. If they could sign an agreement and all reduce their body weight by 2/3, they would have a compelling reason to do that. But that's not what evolution does. It doesn't work by agreement in animal species. It's just whatever works, that's what survives and gets reproduced into the next round. Where humans part from that pattern is that we actually have the means. We have both the cognitive ability, the emotional capacity, and the communication skills to try and solve these bitter conflicts that arise between the interests of the individual and the interests of the group. So let me just try to describe for you one simple dilemma that comes up in human society. Imagine you're the owner of a small business and it's a really thriving business. Maybe it's Gimme Coffee and it's just, you got lines coming out the doors of your establishment. Here, you know it would work in a city 250 miles away. The market conditions are exactly right, but you can't manage it yourself. And you know that if you hire someone else to manage it, then you'll be at the mercy of that person. You won't be able to monitor the person's behavior well enough to prevent him or her from cheating you. And since he can't be punished for cheating, why wouldn't he cheat? What would be the motive if he were an atheist or wasn't possessed of good character? Why shouldn't he cheat? Well, if that's what you think all the people that you might hire would do, and that's what our model as economists encourages you to believe. Homo economicus does not vote, he does not give to charity, he does not do anything except what's in his own narrow interest. So if that's what you think people are really all about, you can't start that venture, because if you do start it, you'll be ripped off. But maybe that's not what the world's about. Maybe there are people you can find who you can trust to manage your business honestly. Here's a thought experiment I want to ask you to think about. You've gone to a very crowded event, maybe an event like this one. You have an envelope in your coat pocket with $10,000 in cash in it. You were planning to buy a used car the next day, and the owner wanted cash. So you went to the credit union, you got the cash. You get home, you're hanging up your coat, you notice the envelope's not in your pocket. And then you have this sinking feeling. You heard that flap sound when you were putting your coat on. The envelope fell on the floor as you're leaving. Will, in effect, be in a position to ask himself, if I lost an envelope with $10,000 in it with my name and address on it in a large anonymous setting, would John return it to me if he found it? I wouldn't know he found it. I'd have no way to punish him if he didn't find it. But I would have an opinion if I'm like most people and I'm the boss of an employee that's worked for me for a couple of years. I would have an opinion, in general a pretty firm one, whether he would or he wouldn't. And those opinions, again, as we know from laboratory research, are surprisingly accurate about people. So if you want to get promoted, you want your boss to believe you would be someone who would return his envelope full of cash if he thought about you in those terms. How can I get him to believe that? Well, Groucho Marx said the secret to success in business is to have a reputation for honesty and fair dealing, and if you can fake that, you've really got it made. So, yeah, I'll try to appear honest, you may say. That's what the opportunist's goal is. But we're much better judges of character, and this is for complicated Darwinian reasons. The reason you're honest is not because you make a rational calculation that it would be good to be honest or rational to be honest. It's because you feel a duty to be honest, because you would feel empathy for the person who would suffer the injury if you cheated that person. And those emotions which drive moral decisions in those contexts are like signs on your face. If you know someone well, you know what their emotional makeup is. And when you ask people, why were you so sure about that person? Why would he return your envelope? I know him well enough to know that it just wouldn't compute for him to think about keeping my cash. And that's what you want your boss to think about you when the time comes to be promoted. How can you get him to think that? It's very simple. Just be that kind of person. If you're not that kind of person, word of that will leak out one way or another. It will be not because you've been caught doing something necessarily, but there will be some lack of inner peace that you experience, or just something different about you that will make people not quite comfortable trusting you. And what's different about the human species compared with all the other animal species is the extent to which we have been able to reap the advantages of economies of large-scale production. We can divide tasks up, we can specialize, we can have lots of people doing different things and all put it together in complex ways. That requires an enormous amount of cooperation and trust to achieve that. And that requires people about whom you believe they wouldn't cheat you if they have a chance to do it when nobody would catch them. So, do you want to be successful? I think most people do want to be successful. I don't think that's a bad thing to want to be successful. But if you want to be successful, the steps that will lead you there with the greatest reliability are not the steps that somebody who wanted only to be successful would take. The Buddhist way is instructive here. You get from point A to point B by maybe heading off in an oblique direction, one side or the other, and you get there sooner than if you try to plow ahead straight forward. So we'll have time to try to flesh that out, I think, as the program goes along. But in the end, I think Charles and I come down to a pretty similar point of view on this.
Okay, great, thank you. We do want you to disagree at some point, so I'll be trying to find out.
I'm not going to say anything unreasonable tonight, so I think it'll be hard for Charles to disagree with me. I'm going to listen carefully to what he said. I mean, maybe he feels that saying I don't think there's a higher being is unreasonable. Fine if he wants to disagree with that. I don't know how we would settle that. But I'll be on the lookout for him saying something unreasonable, and will dutifully disagree if he does so.
Point. Okay, good. So let me just follow up on the thing you were just saying. Are we getting feedback that's problematic? Yes. So is there something we should do? Move this up higher? Okay. How's that? Can you still hear me? Yes. Yes? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Can I just follow up on,
Sure.
on the point you were just making, because it relates to the agreement, but what might also be an underlying disagreement. You both agree about, the importance of success, aiming for certain kinds of goods. You both mentioned virtue and character as one of the ways in which that might sort of look or incarnate itself. But it sounded to me at the end as though your picture, maybe as it was influenced by the kind of Darwinian narrative that you told, instrumentalized virtue a little bit. So it was, its emotions are important. We can read one another's emotions and intentions pretty easily. If you want to succeed, if you want to get to that goal, it's important that others read you as trustworthy, as having a certain sort of character.
Right.
So have that kind of character. And you might think aiming for character isn't supposed to be something that's instrumental in that way. So I just wonder what you'd say in response.
Yeah, there is a kind of an oxymoronic quality to the argument. I'm free to concede that. Somebody talked about his therapist telling him to be more spontaneous.
Right.
So he went out determined to be more spontaneous, and you just know that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
I'm being spontaneous now. I published a book outlining these ideas, and I got a number of angry letters that you're not supposed to be virtuous because it will benefit you.
Right.
And I was sorry people didn't get my attempt to be clear in the book that that's not the reason you're virtuous, but I thought nonetheless that if being virtuous meant that others could detect you as virtuous and favor you as an employee or a partner in interactions that require trust, it might be helpful to know that if you have children trying to decide what path to take, and they say, well, I could either be virtuous or I could be opportunistic. If I'm opportunistic, I'll be rich and famous. If I'm virtuous, I'll be a pauper. If that's not in fact the trade that children face, but it's their perception, then it strikes me as a good idea to tell children that it wouldn't be necessarily fatal to their dreams of prospering in the material world if they were virtuous. And I also am quick to say that if you're trying to be trustworthy and trying to affect the emotions that will make you seem trustworthy, then it's just not going to work. People will immediately detect that you're trying to be spontaneous, and they'll say, that's not the employee I want.
Good. And just to follow up, so what would be the independent reasons then to be virtuous, if not these opportunistic ones?
The emotions that we are born with, that we have the capacity to express, in my way of thinking about the world, had to have evolved for prudential reasons.
Okay.
We know from cross-cultural studies that when a 12-month-old child sees another kid in the group fall down and get hurt and start crying, they don't seem concerned about that. They'll look up just to see who's crying and what the fuss is about. Once they've satisfied that curiosity, they go back to whatever they were doing. But then in every society around the world, at about 18 months to 2 years, children begin to manifest what by every appearance is a genuine concern and sympathy for the kid who got hurt. And they will stop what they're doing, they'll wander over to the kid who's crying, and they'll put an arm out and they'll offer words of condolence. It's a concern for the other. Why did that evolve if it makes you do things that cost you money, makes you give to charity? That's the central Darwinian question. And my answer to it is those are the kind of people we want on our team. The kind of people who don't think only of their own welfare, but think of our welfare. And that's how those emotions came to be forged in the first instance, in my view of things. But does that make them any less noble? Does that mean that if you have to incur a painful sacrifice to help someone, that it isn't painful for you? No, I don't. I think the noblest things we see in human behavior are motivated by those suites of emotions that I think were forged step by step by natural selection. Okay. And they're, to say they're just instrumental is kind of to miss the beauty of them. They're not demeaned in any way by the fact that they have an explanation, I don't believe.
Good. Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, this is fascinating. It's much better than what I prepared. So I think this, if I read what Bob said, I think he's providing a justification for why people might want to do good, right? That apart from religious faith, people might want to be good. Okay? And I don't think that is as much of an anomaly to me. Maybe it is to some economists that the fact that people would want to be doing good is particularly puzzling. What I have observed in life is not that people don't recognize the currency of trust and doing good. What I found was this human dilemma is the most puzzling and curious thing is that here is a creature who recognizes what good is, but finds it difficult always to live that way. Okay. So we once had a debate at our Christian fellowship, and it was in Chinese, and the question was, 人之初性本善. Okay. So for those of you who are laughing, are probably Chinese. What it means is either that or
I told you he was smart.
Just really, really smart. So basically, the topic is: are people sort of born good? In other words, if people, 善 means good. So one team was for and one team was against, and at the end we, had a rousing good time. And then at the end, what we concluded was the human being would be all right if he was all good, and the human being would be fine too if he was all messed, all bad. But here was this weird creature who recognizes when they see good, but have a hard time living it. And there's a Harvard professor called Robert Coles, and he wrote a really interesting article called the disparity between intellect and character. And in it, he described how there was he teaches at Harvard, he teaches an ethics class. And one day, a student came in, she was from a middle class working family in the Midwest. When she was going to Harvard, she had to work in the dorms to make ends meet. And so when she did this, some of her classmates lived in the dorms, and not all of them were nice to her. Some were crude, some were rude, and in particular, this fellow made repeated overtures or propositioned her. She came in crying to Professor Coles and said, this boy gets straight A's in your class. He was, A1 in Harvard is she said, if we wrote an essay on morality, he would get straight A's. I would probably get C's. So she asked him this question: why is it that someone who knows so much about what is right does not live that way? Why could he behave that way? And Professor Coles goes on to reflect on this and says, there's a distance between our moral reasoning, our capacity to reason what is right and wrong, and our moral behavior. This gap, to me is a very telling empirical observation about my own life, because I see it every day. And if you've been to subways in London, you've seen this thing called mind the gap. You ever seen that? Mind the gap, because the subways are old and the trains are small, and there's a big gap between the platform and the cars. I would say in your life, look carefully, mind the gap, because that will tell you something about the world in which we live in, and actually about a world in which perhaps we don't actually see empirically, but which may have existed in our consciousness. A world when that morality, that which we could see, was actually the norm, which we don't see now in this world. Maybe we're homesick for where we came from when we used to belong to God.
Good. Let's turn to the topic of happiness more directly. So we've talked a bit about success and virtue and our kind of theories about the origin of virtue and how it works and how it sometimes doesn't work or where the gaps are. What about happiness? So say something about, either one of you to start off, about your view about what constitutes happiness and how that relates to success in business and the academy and so on and so forth.
It's become a very popular topic in the social sciences. There's a very large and growing literature on the determinants of life satisfaction and happiness.
Right.
The big debate for many years has been whether income affects happiness in the conventional way. And the findings come in two forms. One is when they study income versus happiness within a country at any moment in time, the average happiness level of poor people is significantly lower than the average happiness level of rich people. There is enormous variation at every income level. If you want to be happy, the most important thing for you to have done is to have had happy parents. You can't do anything about that now that you're here. So income may be one of the biggest levers that is available to pull. There are other important ones too, but rich people are, on average, much happier than poor people. If you were born to unhappy parents and you're rich, you're liable to be very unhappy yourself, even though you're rich. You might be blissfully happy, even though you're poor, if you had a naturally buoyant temperament to begin with. But when we look at income and happiness over time or across countries, that relationship is much, much weaker. So if you look at Japan, for example, between 1960 and 2000, the income level on the average rose about fourfold. Happiness levels on the average stayed flat as a pancake during that whole period. People were much richer. Why didn't they get happier? Well, unlike in the cross-section, everybody was getting richer over time. And so if, as some assume, that what matters most beyond a certain point is where do I stand? How am I doing? If you ask the question, how am I doing? A natural way to answer that question is, how am I doing relative to these people I know? And so if you're at the bottom of your group, it's natural to answer the question, must not be doing all that well. And so relative income seems to matter a lot. There are some new studies now showing up that as societies get richer over time, it's not as easy to see, but there are increases in measured happiness levels there too. Whether or not there are increases in measured happiness levels as societies get richer over time, we know there are good things that happen when societies get richer. They invest more in safety. They invest more in environmental cleanup. They invest more in trying to discover cures for debilitating diseases. So if you're in a society and there's a policy question, should we try to take steps to make the country wealthier? Well, you should, of course, guard the environment in the process, but having a wealthier society does many good things for people in ways that I think most of you would consider uncontroversial.
And how are we defining happiness here? Is it just the self-reporting of sort of good feeling?
Yeah, good question. The main variable that's used by happiness researchers is self-reported happiness.
Okay.
They come around and they ask you, how happy are you?
Right.
You're either not happy, you're pretty happy, or you're very happy in the most popular survey. Okay. There are other measures that are more behavioral in nature, and then there are more reflective questions. All things considered, how satisfied with your life these days do you feel? Okay. So you might be having a lot of negative feelings, but all things considered, I think my life's going okay. All those measures tend to agree with one another. If you ask somebody, is your friend happy, then the friend's evaluation agrees with his own evaluation. Okay. So the economists in general are skeptical of these measures, but they've been vetted carefully, and they do seem to correspond to things that look like valid measures of something we ought to care about.
So the psychologist develops the measures and then the economists use them.
Yes, we piggyback on their efforts.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense. What about you? How would you define happiness? Do you follow the general pattern here, or do you have a different picture?
I think in general, I think when we think about happiness, we think about a sense of well-being, a sense of contentment, and sort of the absence of the things you don't want, like anxiety and worries, a sense of insecurity. But I think that if I want to sort of refer you to one passage in the Judeo-Christian narrative that's very telling to me. Okay? In Genesis 3, most of you, even if you don't have a Judeo-Christian background, you know the story about Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit, right? What happened next, to me, is very telling. The narrative says their eyes were opened. What did happen? They saw they were naked. They saw they were naked. And the next thing that happens is God walks in the cool of the garden, and then he says, "Where are you?" to man. And man says, I'm afraid because I'm naked, so I hid. I don't think there is a culture anywhere where those three emotions are not universal. Fear, a sense of shame or inadequacy, and a desire to hide it. Now, when we think about happiness and why it's so elusive in our lives, it's okay to understand that there are ways in which we can feel better. But there are some fundamental sources and reasons why they are elusive. I think it has something to do with the way this world is. And I think to some extent, we may need to look at some of those spiritual roots for unhappiness or discontentment.
So, Charles, nothing you're saying has anything to do with money. And yet you work in finance and you're an economist.
I manage $350 billion.
You manage a lot of money. I mean, you referred to money when we were talking about how you're considering happiness. Why not? Why isn't that something that comes into the picture, at least initially? And if it doesn't, why are you doing what you're doing professionally?
Well, you know, somebody has to do it. No. So I think the question of money is a good one. I think both Christians and non-Christians have almost a stigma around money. So the concern somehow is that, you know, well, on the one hand, some people will ask, well, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? My area of research is about predicting stock returns, and the question we often get is, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? On the other hand, somebody might ask, if you're so good, why are you rich? So if you look at the 7 billion people who live on this planet, what justifies some people living so much better than other people? So the way I think about this is, you know, the core, the most important thing I see myself as a creature, so the most important thing is my reference relative to what my creator wanted. Right? So there's no success apart from that, since I have to figure out why I'm made. So whether you manage money or whether you're an educator or whether you do every other thing, the real success, if you will, is whether or not you're doing what you're called to do, what you think you should do, and you've done everything you can to try to understand that. Because like some people think like Christianity is about poverty or spiritual purity or piety is about poverty. I don't think the focus is on poverty. I think the focus is on priority. So you think of things that God gives you, I think of it this way, as sort of in the eternal scheme of things, zeros. They're all a bunch of zeros. Okay, your endowments, various things, zeros. But if you put God first, they become significant digits that potentially are useful. If you don't, they're still zeros.
I mean, I can imagine that there are people here who are thinking about going into finance, the academy, something related to economics generally. Both of you could have, I mean, both of you are now academics, right? But both of you probably could have gone onto Wall Street. You were on Wall Street for a while and been, you know, fabulously wealthy. Maybe you are fabulously wealthy, I'm not sure. Say something about why you chose not to do that, because I think a lot of people will think that there's a kind of irrationality there. And let me just, a kind of personal anecdote. When I was in grad school, I would often be a TA this was at Yale, I would be a TA for students who were heading in that direction, and they would be taking a philosophy class for whatever reason. And And my fellow TAs and I got the clear impression that a lot of the students viewed us as kind of smart but tragic cases who kind of got hung up on some question and couldn't get out of grad school, and now you're doing and so, you know, why not just focus on the making of big money?
Yeah, it's something that I feel in the business school is the most difficult message to communicate to students. They want to work for McKinsey, they want to work for Goldman Sachs, they want to be a private equity person or a hedge fund manager because they see the spectacularly big paychecks associated with those activities, and they think that that's the way to be happy.
Right.
It's not the way to be happy. The evidence is very clear that salaries beyond a certain point really don't make much difference in terms of the level of contentment that people feel. There's a concept in the psychological literature called flow, when you're deeply immersed in an activity that somehow the day or the hours flew by and you weren't even aware of it. Those, for me, are the very happiest days I ever experienced. They're not the happiest days for my wife, necessarily. When I'm writing a book, the first thing I want to do in the morning is just get to it and pile up some more words on the file. And I'm just carried along by the narrative, wanting it to progress. And so I'm not much of a companion when I'm experiencing flow. But it's not, and so I don't write books most of the time. But it's a joyous experience, and I know many other people who have that experience through their work. And if what you want is to get rich, and it will just be a matter of pure chance if you ever end up with a task that is so engaging to you that you experience the joy of that flow. The very most important thing to do when you pick a job is to pick a job that you think you have the capacity to love just for its own sake. Never mind the salary. We know that salaries are related to job characteristics. If you're going to do a morally compromised job, for example, you can get paid extra. If you write ad copy for RJR trying to persuade teenagers to smoke Camel cigarettes, you'll be paid 3 times as much as if you had the same skills and were writing ad copy for the American Cancer Society trying to persuade teenagers not to start smoking. The moral taint of the first job commands a premium. Just like Adam Smith said, nobody would be a garbage man with a given skill set unless there was a premium pay. Why should you work in those smelly conditions? I'd rather be a lifeguard. The jobs that entail moral compromise pay less. So if you think you want to make money, then you ought to find the most morally culpable job you can find, because other things equal, that'll be the one that pays you the most, or the one that has the most unpleasant condition. The absurdity of that as a strategy for choosing a job, I think, becomes clear when you play it out. If you'll pick a job that you love, what's going to happen? You're going to get immersed in it, you're going to get good at it. And in the modern labor market, the more we study it, the clearer it becomes that if you're really good at something, that's when real material success comes your way. If you're the best at what you do. And if you don't like what you do, what are the odds you're going to ever end up being the best at what you do? It could happen. Maybe you're just so talented that you'll be the best person doing that thing that you don't like. But if you're a betting person, you got to bet against that outcome. So pick a place where the people aren't doing things that you'd be ashamed to do, because if you go there, you'll end up doing those things too. You don't behave differently from your environment for long, people find. And pick a job where you'll just want to be doing that job, and then you'll get good, and the money will probably take care of itself. But if it doesn't take care of itself, at least you'll be doing something you really like. Again, I'm not saying money is not important. You want your kids to go to a good school. The good schools are in the more expensive neighborhoods. So if you're the median earner and you buy a house that's in line with your income, your kids will go to the 50th percentile school. So there's a need to earn income. But if you focus only on the need to earn income, you're going to point yourself in a dead wrong direction with very high probability.
Good. Do you mind?
Yeah. So, yeah. So I don't. I totally. I don't disagree with Bob. Sorry.
Try.
But I think the way I think about it is, if you are a creature, your reference point is God. I'm not sure that getting paid more or less brings you closer or further away from that calling. Okay, so let me make some examples. For example, I managed a portfolio for a not-for-profit Christian organization for 10 years, David. So we have very good returns. Is that a more spiritual endeavor? I had no return. I did it for 0, right? Is that a more spiritual endeavor than the fact that at the same time I was managing a lot of money for a lot of high net worth individuals? I'm not sure. I think the calling is the calling. I will try not to say that price itself informs if I'm clear about the calling. Does that make sense? At least the way I think about it. It's the same thing. I mean, I think it just happens in every circle. In Christian circles, people may say that, why are you an accounting professor? Why aren't you a pastor? That's a more noble calling. In our currency, that might be a more noble calling. Well, if I'm supposed to be a pastor, that's a more noble calling. But if I'm being a pastor for the wrong motives, that's not a very spiritual thing. So at the end of the day, it's between you and your maker. And at the end of the day, everybody else is just providing input. And to make that decision in the context of your conscience before who you think created you and who has a claim on your life.
Maybe you at least differ in this way, that you, in the language of vocation, might think that someone could be called to do something that perhaps isn't going to produce a lot of flow and a lot of joy and well-being. Maybe there's an aspect of duty to it, right, that is going to be different if you're thinking about it as a call from
okay,
God.
But I totally sort of resonate with this flow thing. But let me make that out. So as an example, like my son, it took him a long time, even though he grew up in a Christian family, to decide to like commit his life to be a Christian. It wasn't that he had anything against it. He's just afraid that God was going to like send him out of his flow, so to speak. He was afraid that God would send him to, I don't know what's a horrible thing, be an accountant or something. So, funny thing is he's studying accounting right now in master's, but that was not where he started. So I think it's very natural if you don't have a sort of an orientation, religious, spiritual orientation, it can be very uncomfortable having someone, or even having to even ask someone for permission in your life, or maybe inconvenient. But if you think about who it is that you are trusting, and if this is really the creator, it's not like asking for permission from your thesis advisor. I mean, this guy actually sort of potentially knows you and actually wants you to be in your flow. After all, he designed the flow. So it may not be a terrible thing.
Okay. So I think we're getting to the point where we're going to take some questions from the assembled audience. Is there time to text in a final question if they have them, or are they coming up here? Okay.
Okay. So while our speakers prepare for the question and answer section, you can take a minute to fill out the surveys that you have. You got as part of your flyer coming in. The Veritas planning team aims to create events that are relevant, thought-provoking, and engaging to people of all backgrounds and beliefs. And so we need your help with that. Please pick up your Veritas 60-second survey card, which was part of your pamphlet, and you could fill that out now. It looks like this. Also, in regards to the email address at the bottom, we'll only use your email address to send you a survey about tonight's forum, or to let you know if you've won our iPad in our raffle today. And after the conversation, you can fill out the bottom section of your survey card. So at this point, you can also send in any last-minute questions you have to the number up there. Okay. And Are you set for the questions?
Are we? Yeah, I think we're ready whenever,
Okay.
whenever you are, yeah.
Did you want to?
Okay. Yeah, I know, it feels like an earthquake. It just... Oh, there's some good ones. Okay, if you're done with your surveys, we'll bring it back.
Are you good?
Yeah, they're good, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, if you're finished.
So now we're going to reorient
You
our
got it.
attention to Dr. Chignell, who's going to ask a couple of questions from the audience based on what you've texted in.
Okay, great. So there are some excellent questions here. Let me start with one for Bob. As I understand Dr. Frank, I see the pursuit of virtue as a means to achieve the harmony of the group, which in turn will cause my own benefit. Humans are gregarious by nature, so this is all right. However, as an atheist, I can't help but feel emptiness and some lack of purpose once I acknowledge this. That is the view that you were putting forward. How could I deal with this, the emptiness, the lack of purpose?
I think as an empirical matter, atheists don't suffer disproportionately from emptiness. I think the people who feel empty are the ones who don't have engaged relationships with friends, family, and professional associates. And there's nothing about how we came to have a desire to have such relationships or a tendency to take satisfaction from having them that depends in any way on how those things came to be. I mean, those are just contingent facts about human beings that are clear, however you might think they arose. So if you feel empty, or if you didn't have anybody you could predict would return your envelope with the $10,000 in it, in both those cases, you need to get out more, I think, and form relationships with people of a more lasting sort.
Okay.
Again, Sarah asked, is it your resume or your relationships? Well, it's not one or the other. I think if you're not able to form effective, engaging relationships with other people, then you're not an effective member of a team. And if you're not an effective member of the team, you probably won't enjoy much material success. I mean, there are a handful of occupations where you don't have to be on a team, but you know that the human condition on average requires you to be a trustworthy, likable, loyal, honest member of a team. And
So the emptiness response is, you're suggesting, just kind of irrational. This is the
not
way
that
it
it's
develops,
irrational, it just may mean that you need to reach out more
I see,
and
yeah.
dig a little deeper in your attempts to forge those relationships.
Okay.
Anyway, people who report that they have a lot of close relationships show up as consistently at higher levels of life satisfaction in those surveys that we were talking about earlier.
Right, okay. This is for Charles. If we're only good because we believe God is watching, are we really being good, or do we just fear punishment?
Very good question. I'm hoping that I don't feel good just because there's an exam or that God is watching. I'm hoping that I feel good because I want good. I love good. Because good intrinsically is valuable to me. Okay, so now how does one get that way? I'm not sure. I don't know. I think that there is a longing. There's a longing that's deeper than the longing for friendship, or this longing for belonging, the longing for a sense of security. There's a longing for home, spiritually, because we were made once, we were made for fellowship with God. And in the absence of that, there is always a longing. We may not think there's an answer to it, but as C.S. Lewis puts it, if the fact that I am hungry doesn't prove that there is such a, does not prove that I can find food, but it might show that there is such a thing as food. And I think that there is something deeper, a deeper desire in the human soul for connection with Creator God.
Here's something for both of you. Can hedonists be happy? That is, people who are kind of living for pleasure? Or are they excluded from happiness because they don't prioritize virtue, as both of you do? Let's start with you, Bob.
You know, you never want to say never about anything. I'm sure there are some happy hedonists out there. Right. I mean, if a hedonist was born to really happy parents, probably he would be happy even though he didn't have some of the more traditional sources of deeper satisfaction. But you know, you play the odds in life. If you want to be happy and content with your life, looking back, probably a life of pure hedonism isn't a good strategy to bet on.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think that once you've decided that pure hedonism, and actually, you know, what is this, Saturday night, and you're all here, you know, and I recognize this is not the entire population of the student body at Cornell, even while. So I think that this is a self-selected audience and probably think that hedonism alone isn't what life is all about. Then I think you have to think carefully about what else is important and how you find it.
Okay. Dr. Frank, by what metric do you measure nobility and virtuousness, if not religiously? In a moral quandary where there is no clear right answer, how can we gauge what actions are best?
You know, as an economist, my natural inclination is to side with the people who measure the costs and benefits of the different alternatives and try to assign value to them as consistently and as clearly as possible. And then when there's a tough call to make, try to make the choice that entails the greatest balance of good over harm. I appreciate the idea that there are good reasons not to trust a consequentialist. I think every interesting moral choice is one where you want to do something, but you don't know if it's okay to do it because it might be harmful to others. And if you're the one making the call, that means you have to estimate how beneficial it will be for you and how much harm will it cause to others. And those estimates are always very ambiguous, and since you have an interest in the matter, you're liable to find yourself fudging upwards the benefits that you think you'll get from doing this thing you want to do and playing down the harm that it will cause to others, and so you're more likely to do it than you ought to be in some cases. And then as more and more people choose that way, then you get a race to the bottom and norms fall apart and so on. So there are many difficult dilemmas, but I think in principle the way to resolve them most satisfactorily is to look for the values at stake on the competing sides and try to figure out some way to assess them. And if the total balance of gain versus harm is bigger for one choice than the other, then it's always possible to find a way to divide up the gain so that everybody comes out better off than if you don't do it that way. And when you can make people come out ahead in a win-win sense, then you should, and you'll be more likely to get a good outcome if you try that.
So there's no room for tragedy in that picture?
Oh, if you saw Sophie's Choice, there's tragedy aplenty. A Nazi soldier tells you, I'm going to kill one of your kids, you pick. And who would want to make that pick? There's tragedy all over the place.
But what you're saying is a consequentialist looks for the best you can do in the situation to maximize happiness.
Maybe the right choice is not to pick in that case.
Yeah.
Maybe the right choice is to say, I'm not going to cooperate and we'll all be shot. You know, there are many, many difficult choices, and your field's better at those than my field is. I think I consider myself an expert in the small potatoes dilemmas, you know, the ones where he's making noise late at night, I don't want noise late at night. Isn't there something we can do to...
Dr. Lee asked, do we need more smart people or more good people? In reference to the manner in which our university system is organized. Is this to imply that faith should become integrated into our school and university system?
Oh. I think Cornell is a leading force in separating the two, so I'm not that retro. Okay? But I think it's been healthy actually for both the spiritual pursuit and the educational to think carefully about what each one is about. Okay? But I do think that the pendulum has swung to the point where we actually relegate all discussions of anything spiritual or religious, it seems, to dorm rooms and beer parlors, or maybe philosophy classes, I don't know, I didn't attend all. But I think that it would be, there was a time when university meant, you know, universal but in diversity. And we actually talked not only about knowledge, we talked about wisdom, that is the ability to apply technical knowledge in your day-to-day living, integrated across many fields. I think that is a healthy thing. We should talk about what is important, what is valuable, what good look like, what you know, why is it that at certain cost, you know, your harm is going to mean more to me than my benefit, and under what circumstances. A lot of these things are worth debating. I think even more important, we need to actually recognize that faith and reason are not polar opposites. I have one fishing buddy who's a very intelligent economist that actually he once told me, you know, faith means you can't question it, right? If you questioned it, then it's no longer, axiomatically no longer faith. I think that's just not true. I think that, you know, life is all about how you decide under uncertainty. And in the most important things in your life, you will always be deciding under uncertainty. Like, I can't mathematically prove that the plane that took me to Boston would have saved me taking me there, but I bet my whole life on it. I can't mathematically prove that my wife for 30 years loves me, but I bet my life on it. And in the realm of moral and relational domains in your life, you're constantly making those decisions. And in those decisions, you're making a weight of evidence type assessment. And somehow, in academic, we start to think that if it isn't in the realm of matter, energy, something that's material, that somehow we would be encroaching. And I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's worth talking about the role of uncertainty in moral settings and how we can live better. I think universities are supposed to be about that.
I'm still looking for disagreements here. Do you think that, so it sounds a lot of the time like you agree about the sort of behaviors and about some of the results as well, happiness and joy and flow and so forth, but that it's just a disagreement about the way to motivate the behaviors, or kind of the underlying narrative, the worldview, the phrase you use, by which you would kind of tell the story. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you think it's getting you to where you're supposed to be going? You're going to tell the story in a kind of religious fashion and appeal to God's will and vocation and so forth. You'll have a different kind of story that's more naturalistic, referencing kind of Darwinian theories as well as kind of consequentialist pictures. But it doesn't look as though or tell me if this is wrong, if the results kind of practically behaviorally are that different. Yeah, sure.
I'm not sure that they are all that. I don't know whether empirically you could say that people live better, more moral lives because they've adhered to one thing or another. I would make one observation though about this whole process of faith, which is God doesn't coerce faith. Okay, I think in other words, if He wants to so if you say to God, why don't you prove yourself? Why don't you just move this mug from here to over there and I'll believe in you? I don't know if anyone's ever tried that. But, I'll give you, God, in fact, I'm in a good mood, I'll give you 30 seconds. Okay, so God often doesn't engage in that sort of thing. He doesn't entertain it. Okay, if God wants to arm wrestle you with physical evidence of, believing in Him and you'll have a better life, okay, there's no game, right? Boom, it's over. Because if He wants to coerce you through physical evidence, He could. But I like what Blaise Pascal, the mathematician, said. The Pascal's triangle guy. So
He was also a philosopher.
Oh, he was a philosopher. Oh, I'm glad you were very in his spare time, right? He was a gambler. I think he was a hedge fund manager.
That's true too. Rolling dice.
The binomial tree. So, probably. So, one thing. No, you got me forgot. So, what Blaise Pascal said about this, what did he say?
The wager.
Yeah, the wager wasn't what I was thinking of. Okay. So he said, he said a couple of things that I find that I remember. One is that the ultimate end of reason is to show you that reason alone is not enough. Okay. What he means is that if you follow the rationality of your brain, like if you're following this path, it's winding up this road and you're winding, when you get to the very top, right? You're following your rationality. When you get to the top, you'll realize that's where the road ends. Because the rational being recognizes there are limitations to his rationality. And then he looks up and he sees 1 billion stars in the night sky and sees a rocket sitting there, and he recognizes the rational thing is that if he wants to reach the skies, he needs to leave his road, get on that rocket. That's a rational conclusion. So there's always, that's the other thing he said. He said there's always sufficient evidence for those whose inclination is to seek God. And there's also sufficient evidence for those whose inclination is otherwise. But that's the way I think it might be a reasonable design for a guy who does not want to coerce. Because actually, you elicit out of yourself who you are by the decisions you make under uncertainty. Honestly, to tell you the truth, if we're all operating under certainty all the time, we'd all make the same decisions, right? Subject to, some utility function difference. We basically make the same decisions. Where we make different decisions is how we weigh the uncertainty. And in matters of faith, that's all important.
Sorry, almost grapefruit. So I found an op-ed that you wrote in USA Today, or co-authored, where you say, "No good comes of arguing about religion. Look at the Middle East and Republican primaries." But I do want to ask you to argue a little bit about religion in response to that and the question, which is just to say, look, does being religious, does having the narrative that Charles is putting forward change anything with respect to how you think about happiness? And do you want to reject part of what it changes?
My mother was a very spiritual person. She, for the last decades of her life, was very deeply involved in an Indonesian meditation movement called Subud. They would meet and meditate for hours in a group and seek the will of God, was the way she put it. And she used to worry about me that I didn't have a spiritual connection of anything like the one she had. And I could see what it did for her. I mean, she was a very charismatic woman, a woman that you could just sense there was this aura about her. And I lack that, I feel. I don't have that quality that she had. And it seemed to me it would be good to have that quality. Where can I get some of that? Well, just be religious and you'll get it. But I didn't feel that was an option for me. I once spent a week with the Dalai Lama in India. A group of us went to talk to him about what Western scholars had written about why you should be moral if you weren't religious. And it becomes instantly apparent when you're in the same space with him that there's some radiant spiritual quality that he has that I don't have. I don't know very many people who have anything remotely like that, but I think it would be great to have some of that. But I don't see what path for me is accessible to go there. I mean, I think I would have to give up other things that are an important part of who I am, and
so say something about that.
I'm not unhappy enough with who I am to be willing to do that.
Is it believing things that you think are false? I mean, it's you just can't. You wouldn't want to give up
I don't even
the
want to
pursuit of
presume
truth,
to say they're false. It's
No, that
just
you
to
think are
believe
false.
things that I can't
Yeah.
find compelling reason to believe.
Okay. Okay. That's a good difference. Yeah.
So,
Do you,
so
a couple more questions here, but yeah. Real
I was
quick.
going to agree.
Sure.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but
okay.
if you don't want me to agree, let's go on to another topic. But nobody wants to believe in what they define no compelling reason to believe. Okay? But there are times when you may need a little help to have understand or illumination, right? If you know, God's light is like light coming in, and there's a big curtain there, and you can't see it, but you may need help to have it removed. That you ask God to open to remove the curtain. It is a reasonable and rational thing. If God is bigger than you, and you recognize that you may have problem lifting that curtain, it's reasonable to ask Him.
Okay, good. This is for Bob. If having emotions and doing good benefits the individual, why didn't that same trait or those same traits evolve in other animals? In other words, why do we see such extremes of altruism and virtue in the human species and not in others?
Yeah, it's a great question, and Frans de Waal, who's a noted primatologist and a dear friend of mine, has written several really quite compellingly good books suggesting that we do see the origins of these traits in humans in several of the other primates. But still, the differences are striking. The 3-year-old child immediately knows what the adult is trying to do and rushes over to help, even if it's an adult unrelated. The chimpanzees don't seem to get that another individual is trying to do something and have any inclination to go and help. I think that the idea of giving up something of your own and getting a benefit maybe later, maybe not at all, is a very difficult problem to solve. And you need very deep communication skills, the emotional capacities and means of expressing them in ways that others can decipher and rely on statistically to make predictions about what you do. Those are all very, very complicated and difficult problems to solve. And it looks like other species are sort of at an early stage of solving those kinds of problems, but just haven't gotten anywhere near as far as humans have.
For Charles, you quote the Bible and use it to back up some of your views, but the Bible is also quite clear that the rich are not able to get into heaven, or that it's as easy for the rich as it is for a camel to get through the eye of a needle. How do you put together these tensions?
I'm glad you're reading the Bible. Yeah, I think that Jesus does say it is harder to get to heaven, for the rich to get into heaven than through the eye of the needle. And that passage actually has 2 examples around it. One of them is a rich young man who wouldn't be, you know, when Jesus said, "Go sell everything, follow me," he declined. And that precipitated this comment that he regrets. In fact, one of this is Jesus looked at this young man, loved him, and said, you know, it's sad. Okay, it's sad that those riches are more important to you than something else. But then, just behind that, there's a story of a fat little guy called Zacchaeus, who is a very wealthy tax collector, who I think tax collectors are like today's hedge fund managers or something. It's pretty bad. And actually, you know, Jesus looked at this fat little guy on a tree and he says, "Hey, kids, come on down. I want to have dinner with you tonight." This guy runs scrambling down, and then he actually says, "Well, if I owe anybody anything, I'm going to pay back with fourfold," or something like this. So the thing I think that's really important is where your heart is, what is important to, what is really important deep down. And that isn't for me to judge, for other people to judge. You need to know.
So you'd agree that you cannot serve both God and money?
Yeah, I agree. You cannot serve both God and money.
But you can make money.
Yeah, you can make money and serve others. I think that is true. And what you do with your one hand, don't let the other hand know. Okay, just do it. In other words, if you're generous, don't go around making a big deal of it.
Would you recommend to people that they think about a career in finance? Do you?
Hey, you need good hedge fund managers more than a lot of other things. I was going to say more than something, but I think I better not. Okay, so I'm not looking at you. So I think that think of this. You need good dentists. You need good, honest people. Just like Bob said.
Right.
You know, it's a scarcity. Okay. Let me give you. I have a friend who. I know one guy who worked for a hedge fund for 2 years. He didn't know that much before he started. Then he worked for 2 years, and they just started a company competing directly with these guys. Okay, and when he was asked why, he said, "Well, you know, I got seed money, $100 million." He said, "How often do you get that?" In other words, he does not disagree with the fact that this was not a moral thing to do, but he says, "Hey, you'd understand, it's $100 million." Okay. So here's the tension. You know, when do we say, "Oh yeah, I understand, it's $100 million. Go ahead, do it to me." You wouldn't feel that way. But if you were in that situation, would you do it too? So here's the human dilemma. I'm not comparing. I'm doing any relative comparisons, who's better, who's worse, or who could even live better. I'm just saying, look, there is a standard higher than the sky. And if in your deepest, most lucid moment you desire that standard, then you should reach for it. You shouldn't assume it cannot be reached.
Good. We're getting to the end of our time here. There's one last question, but maybe we can fit that into a kind of closing statement as well. So the final question is a broad one. It's just, is there a difference between joy and happiness? It's for both of you. Is there a difference between joy and happiness? Happiness seems to be based on circumstances, while joy seems to have a deeper meaning in light of one's general outlook on life. And so since we started with you for the beginning, I guess we should start with you for the end. Does that make sense?
I think the common understanding of those two terms is that they are different. And the difference is in a way similar to the difference between two concepts discussed by the economist Tibor Skotowski, the difference between comfort and pleasure. Pleasure being analogous to joy and comfort being happiness. Comfort is the absence of discomfort, basically. If you're not hungry, then you're comfortable. If you want to have pleasure, you've got to be hungry first, and then the act of moving between states from being hungry to being sated, that's the moment that pleasure occurs. So I think the common understanding of joy has a similar temporal component to it. It's the dynamic shift between a bad state and a good state, or a pretty good state and a great state. It's the surprise, the exhilaration from something perhaps not even expected that happens, that's just so much better than what just was. And satisfaction is a much more muted concept than that, but probably more important when you think about what long-run choices you ought to be making. If you want to think about programming some joy into your life, then you might do as cultures in the past did, which is to fast for a while and then have a feast. I mean, there are ways to sort of construct that experience. But I think there are many other practical things that are more worth worrying about than that. If you want to lead a life, you have to think about whether you'll have money enough to lead the kind of life that you aspire to lead. And in New York City, if you want to have a couple of kids and feel like you've educated them well, most of the people we know in New York City feel that means they've got to send them to private schools, and that means $35,000 a year tuition. Well, maybe it would be hard to lead the kind of life you want to live then if you live in New York City when you have small kids. I'm really grateful we didn't live in New York City with small kids. Our kids walked 3 blocks to Bell Sherman Elementary School, which was included in our property tax bill, which, though not small, was nowhere near $35,000 a year. And they went to school with kids from all around the world who lived in the graduate student housing up the road. So if you choose your environment carefully, and it can be a different one at different stages in your life, you can construct a life where you don't need lots of money to do the things that really count for you. And you can try to pick a task you like, you can try to get good at it, you can try to get immersed and experience those feelings of satisfaction, and you can build your network of close people around you, both professionally and personally. And so all those things are within reach for people, whether they believe in whether they're Jews or Christians or non-believers. So I think there are good choices available to people, and I think when people think only about how can I succeed in this narrow material sense of the term, do they make choices that end up being kind of sad when they look back. We were on the road to somewhere, but then we got there and it wasn't anywhere.
Thanks.
Same question. So I don't know how to compare across subjects. Let me just give you a time series observation about one subject, me. You may not like me much today, but I assure you, you would like me much less if I didn't become a Christian many years ago. And with respect to the question of joy versus happiness, I'm not sure. I always associate happiness with sort of moods or ups and downs, and I do think of joy as some sort of quiet state of sort of when I reflect on reality, I have a sense of wellness that swells up from nowhere. Before I was a Christian, in my most lucid moment, in my quietest moments of my life, I have to say I was, in retrospect, not joyful. Okay? Melancholy, maybe, because I seem to see the world too much as it really is. But I think the main difference after I became a Christian is that in my most lucid moment, I still have ups and downs and times when I go crazy. But my most lucid moment, when I see things most clearly, joy is not an unreasonable word to describe how I feel.
Is there anything else by way of closing statement that either of you would like to make?
I think we've kept people from the pubs far too long already.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Let me just say that since philosophy was a little under attack here once in a while, I want to point out that one of the things we do in philosophy is metaphysics, and one of the things you think about in metaphysics is the question of identity. So what is it for something to be identical to something else? What is it for this block of wood here to be identical to the table? And we have all these complicated theories about what that involves. And so I want to tell you that given all the metaphysical theories of identity that I know of, you are not identical to your resume. So that is one result. But apart from that very minimal result, I'm very happy to have learned from and gotten a lot out of this discussion with these two incredibly impressive and accomplished economists. So thank you very much, and thank you for your questions.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.